Outputting our coverage. It's what we do.
That's all we do every Thursday
At 5:30. College football.
College football.
Mountain West Conference.
Doesn't matter.
SEC
Is all that matters.
Nick Saban
Is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's all. Let's start the show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in once again to another exciting edition of Outputting Our Coverage. Got an action-packed show for you tonight. As always, lots of college football news, lots of things going on in the sports world. David, first let's talk about something that everyone gets upset about every year, but that in the end is really kind of meaningless. The College Football Hall of Fame.
Right, it's pretty worthless. But
Yeah.
2013 College Football Hall of Fame inductees for just got announced. Some of the names you'll recognize, some of them you might not. Of course, the big headliner for some reason was Vinny Testaverde. I'm not sure why he was the headliner of the
Vinny
class.
Testaverde, if you remember back, he was part of the Miami team versus, the convicts versus Catholics.
Oh, yeah.
Showing up in their fatigues to the game or whatever. So,
And then they got spanked by Alabama in the national championship game.
so kind of a bad boy image, I guess. But I don't know. I don't think he's really even the... And maybe this is kind of showing my age a little bit. I don't think he's the biggest name necessarily out of there.
I don't either. I think Orlando Pace, you could make it, but he made more of an impact in the NFL. Danny Werfel, maybe arguably the best quarterback of all time in college football.
No.
Yes.
Really? He
looked,
won the Heisman, sure, but...
You've got to look at the stats. He put up gaudy numbers, and now he had the
Was he
Spurrier
a system
offense.
quarterback?
Obviously. Does that detract from
Okay, you're right.
how good he was? He was good in the system at Florida.
But really, you think he's possibly the best quarterback in college football history?
Name me another one. In college football, and do not even bring up Tebow.
No, I'm not going to say Tebow. I don't know. I mean, I guess that is kind of a tough question when you bring it up.
How about Tommy Frazier?
Tommy Frazier, different style.
Completely different style. Also,
Equally
2013
successful.
inductee.
Yeah. And speaking of which, a lot of folks have said that the Hall of Fame is completely ridiculous until Tommy Frazier gets in. I agree with that. He's in now. Hall of Fame no longer completely ridiculous.
Just mostly ridiculous.
Just mostly ridiculous. This is a great question about who might be the best or the best college football quarterback of all time.
Love to get your opinions.
Yeah, certainly send in your opinions. Maybe a guy... See, it's difficult with some of these guys because their NFL success starts coming in, like a guy like Peyton Manning.
Right.
Somewhat successful at Tennessee.
Couldn't win the big game.
Didn't win the big game. Super successful NFL quarterback. It kind of clouds your judgment a little bit.
Okay, Matt Leinart. Incredibly successful college quarterback. Maybe overhyped because of the team that he was on.
See, that to me, Matt Leinart and Danny Werfel are pretty close together as far as how the quality of play that I would consider.
Okay. Oh, wow. Putting Werfel on the class of Leinart. I never was a big Leinart fan. I was a Leinart hater.
I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since the days of Danny Werfel, so maybe I've kind of forgotten how dominant those Spurrier teams were, which... They really were pretty dominant in the SEC to some extent, but that's an excellent question. Maybe a topic for a blog post.
I think so. I think that'd be a good one.
See how that goes. Other names of note, I guess, getting inducted, Teddy Bruschi actually was a defensive end at Arizona.
I did not know that.
That'd be a good trivia question.
That would.
Ron Dane, running back from Wisconsin. I'm sure a lot of Auburn fans remember him running all over Auburn and winning in the Capital One Bowl.
Right.
That's
kind of the big
about
names.
the only names I recognize. There's some older guys on there too. Percy Snow, who actually sounds like a Motown singer.
Right. Dan Troll.
Yeah.
That sounds like a used car salesman. Anyway, he's a quarterback at Baylor. A couple coaches got in. I did know some of their names. Wayne Harden, a longtime coach at Navy. Very high success rate at Navy. And then Bill McCartney. A lot of people forgot about him. When he came to Colorado in '82, they were a wreck. They're
a wreck now, too.
Right. They're kind of like Colorado now, but
Yeah.
they were terrible. He came in, turned the program around, actually got them to win.
They were a legitimately good team for a few years,
They
right?
were, yeah. They were pretty good.
Did they actually win a national championship?
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In the early 90s, I believe.
Yeah.
And they were actually involved in that game where they got 5 downs.
They got
as well.
5 downs.
So that's how good of a coach he was.
That's right.
That gets you in the Hall of Fame.
Cordell Stewart. He was a quarterback over there, wasn't he? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. Interesting fact about the College Football Hall of Fame, it will actually be moving to Atlanta.
Really?
Yeah, I believe it's scheduled to open next year. It will be located kind of down close to the Georgia Dome, in that sort of area. Speaking of which, have you seen the new designs for the new Georgia Dome?
I have, and they are awesome. I would love either one of the two designs.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
I
one
like
of
them look like the Chinese Olympic Stadium.
The bird
to me.
nest,
Yes.
right, yeah.
Kind of crazy. I still am not 100% sure why Atlanta needs a new stadium, because
I agree, but it's if you want the Super Bowl, it's been proven in this day and age you have to have a nice, shiny new stadium, or it's not coming to your town.
And certainly not just the Super Bowl, but if you build a new stadium there in Atlanta, I think you're a legitimate player for the college football championship game.
They might even be trying to get the Olympics to come back.
Yeah, also a possibility. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how it shakes out. We hope you'll keep an ear on us as we take this short break here and outputting our coverage. We'll be back on the other side talking some big news coming out in the sports world. A few weeks ago, the first openly gay player in any professional team sport of the Big Four. We'll talk about the impact of that, how we see things moving forward on the other side here of outputting our coverage.
I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. You could cut ties with all the lies that you've been living in. And if you do not want to see me again, I would understand.
Welcome back in to Outputting Our Coverage. As we mentioned before the break, big news coming out in the sports world, I guess about 2 weeks ago. We were on hiatus last week for personal reasons, but we're back now. The first openly gay player in any of the Big Four professional sports, Jason Collins. Kind of a caveat to this: he's technically a free agent right now. He's not actually on an NBA team,
right?
But he's played for the Celtics,
the Wizards, most recently.
Yeah, I think he played in Atlanta for a while.
I don't know about that.
I can't remember, but not a huge star player, but certainly a role player in the NBA who's had some success. David, first of all, do you think this is a big story? And second of all, do you think it should be a big story?
I think you can't deny that it is a big story. Every media outlet, not just ESPN, CNN, MSNBC, everybody, Fox News, it was headlining. All the newspapers, front page article. No, I don't think it should be big news. I think gay athletes have been in the sport. They just haven't come out in the open while they've been playing. I think secretly in the locker room, a lot of people know. Charles Barkley says he knows he played with gay players.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be a big deal. I mean, it's in this day and age, everybody's entitled to their beliefs and what they want to do. However, I think it's weird how the comparisons get drawn to Collins coming out as gay and Tebow coming out with his Christian faith, and how the two are received differently. Almost as one should keep it personal and not really be open about it, but the other one is applauded for how open and coming out he was.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty interesting.
I've seen some comments about that, and that is somewhat interesting. The way that things get covered, and we don't want to get. Of
course, Tebow isn't the first Christian athlete to come out,
and I don't think the situations are directly comparable. I think there's a little bit of merit to the arguments on both sides there. My question, though, is David is a former football player in a locker room with a lot of guys. How would you have felt and the mood of the locker room personally? And granted, this was a high school experience, so it may be a little bit different than professional. But how's an openly gay player going to be received in the locker room atmosphere?
I think it would be received a lot differently than a lot of people expect. I think more than anything, some of the little jabs back and forth at each other would have to change and could get awkward. As far as changing and that kind of stuff, if he's been in the NBA that long and nothing's happened, I don't think anybody has a problem with him being in the locker room just because there's no incidents. And I don't think a lot of people are going to be intimidated by that. But it is a locker room, and people talk about it, and you don't really know until you get in it. It can be raunchy, and it can be nasty, and there are what would be considered now homophobic slurs just kind of tossed out back and forth between players, and that would probably be the most awkward thing in my mind, would be the first time something like that slips up and he's in their presence, what happens then? And he might just play it off. So I think more than anything, that would probably be the most awkward.
I've also seen some folks comparing this to a Jackie Robinson type situation. I think
really?
That's way off.
That's way out of line. I don't know.
It's a very different situation. I think the road that Jackie Robinson had to go way more difficult, and certainly an era that was not nearly as politically correct, for better or worse, as we are now.
Right.
That's very difficult road to go. Have you seen the new Jackie Robinson movie?
I have not. Have you?
I have not either. I've heard it's worth a look, if nothing else, to remind yourself, kind of the things that he had to go through, and the past of where baseball was.
And I think that's the big deal, is that Jackie Robinson was targeted.
Yes.
In every single game, and they tried to take him out of the game. There were GMs who hated the fact that he was there and tried to get rid of him. Everybody did everything they could to get rid of him. I don't think Collins is going to see that kind of...
I don't think so either.
Hate.
In the mainstream media, mainstream public awareness of openly gay people is already a much different situation than the race relations were at the time of Jackie Robinson. So I think that comparison, like we said, is totally off base.
Nice Jackie Robinson.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Now, as far as the sport that is near and dear to our hearts, college football, how long do you think it is now before we have college football players coming out as openly gay?
I think it'll probably take a little bit. I'm kind of torn between this. There's two different sides to this. I think football is perceived as more of a macho sport,
right,
whether it is or not. I don't think it is. Anybody who's played basketball knows there's a lot of contact
Sure.
when you get to that level playing basketball. At the same time, there's so many more people playing college football. There's D1, D2, D3 universities all over the country. You have a lot more players on each team. I think it's going to happen. I think a punter already came out as openly gay in the NFL.
How about a major SEC school, though? I mean, do you see that even happening? Like at a school like Alabama or Auburn, do you think at this point in time would it be possible for that to happen?
I think it would be tougher for that to happen, but I think it has more to do with the region than the sport.
Sure.
I mean, it's going to be tougher to come out down in the South just because there is still that perception of homophobe.
And honestly, I'd be interested to see the fan reaction to that, because a large portion of the SEC fan bases, rightly or wrongly, we're certainly not judging one way or the other, feel that lifestyle is not an acceptable lifestyle.
Right.
And
very conservative.
You take two things that are very near and dear to people's hearts, say a relatively high-profile SEC football player on your favorite team who goes against your moral and religious beliefs. It's actually quite a quandary at that point, right?
I really think, and it should not be this way, but I think this would be the way. What player comes out? Is it the struggling wide receiver who is on again, off again in his pass attempts and is not really reliable, or is it the all-star quarterback who's thrown for 5,000 yards in his year and a half? Is it the All-American or is it the Joe Blow?
See, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
If it's the All-American, I think a lot of the and I'm not going to say what I was thinking. I think he's forgiven for a lot more.
Sure.
I think people
won't care. They just want to win.
They just put it in the back of their mind.
Sadly, I think when you put people between their religious convictions and whether or not their team wins a football game, most of the time they're going to choose their team winning a football game, just realistically.
Yeah.
So that's what's going to happen. But
I think we're several years away from that happening.
I think so too. I think it's going to be a little while, but it's certainly an interesting angle to pay attention to, and I think you're kidding yourself if you think that there are not gay players on these football teams, even on the SEC football teams.
I would say probably every major sport,
yeah,
and a lot of the non-major sports,
yeah, and I think, like you said, most people. Most of the players, I don't really think it would bother the players that much. They're there, they have a job to do. They're not so concerned about that. But the fan reaction to me would be the interesting thing to pay attention to. So certainly a story we'll follow. The interesting thing to me about Jason Collins will be if he gets picked up by another NBA team.
I think he will. He's serviceable enough, and he's got enough positive media out of this. I don't think he'll have a problem.
Yeah, so that'll be definitely something to watch out for. We're going to take another quick break here. Got some other college football news and notes. If you've been living under a rock, the SEC and ESPN teaming up, another deal with the devil for eternity, basically.
Right.
We'll break down that deal for you, let you know what to expect. Even though it's the off season, still a lot going on in college football. We'll be talking all that on the other side here of Outputting Our Coverage.
It's time for SEC preview. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, 12 can't count. SEC, college football robber barons. SEC, yeah, they're big, they're fast, they're strong. And Missouri and Texas A&M as well. Yeah, SEC preview. Here we go.
I can't help.
All right.
I can't help but rap along with that.
You really can. That's I've heard it played on radio stations nationwide. Really, like the local 103.1 We Up.
That's right.
Is that still a thing?
I don't know.
It was a thing when we were in high school. The We Up. It was the radio station is preferred by many of our compatriots.
And WZYP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's still a thing or not. I don't really listen to the radio. The only thing I listen to is old Outputting Our Coverage shows in a continuous attempt to make what we're providing to you, our faithful listeners, the best possible product it can be.
I think it is.
Yeah, it already is.
Speaking of the best possible product, how about the SEC network going 24/7?
How about the SEC network? David, first of all, ESPN SEC deal, SEC network, positive or negative?
That's a positive. I mean, when you join the best conference with the most prominent news organization, I think it's a good thing.
Do you see a conflict of interest?
No. I think...
See, I'm a little concerned about this. I'm torn. As a football fan, I think I've talked about this before. As a football fan, I think it's great. More SEC stuff on TV, I'm going to watch it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if it's not on my cable, I'm going to be angry, as are a lot of people.
Right.
I guess we should go through the details first. Basically, SEC Network, I think it's going to be very similar to an ESPNU.
Right.
The same kind of idea. It's actually going to be based out of Charlotte, where the ESPNU offices are. 24/7 SEC programming. Some content will be original content produced by the schools themselves.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, I think that may have varying degrees of success.
Right.
3 football games each week will be on the SEC network. So I think what you may see is the games that are currently on, like, what they're calling the SEC network on Fox and
used
whatever
to be
your local
JP Wheeler.
Yeah, the Jefferson Pilot
right,
game.
Yeah.
Those types of games, I think, will be on this SEC network channel now. CBS still has the first pick each week, so
right.
they get the marquee game. And then after that, ESPN kind of gets to distribute among the networks. An interesting thing is that CBS will no longer be exclusive in that 2:30 time slot. ESPN can also put games at that time now.
No, that's impressive. I did not know that.
So that will be...
That's a big deal.
That is a big deal. Because traditionally, you know, if you were on that SEC game at 2:30, guaranteed national exposure. You're pretty much the only big name game on at that point because the only other people playing are the Big Ten. Nobody wants to watch
it. And nobody cares. They have their own network.
So certainly it's going to be a little bit of a change. The crazy thing to me, the contract between the SEC and ESPN runs until the year like 2034.
Right. That makes sense.
That's crazy. What if we're playing football on hoverboards and we're not even watching it on TVs anymore in 2034?
Oh, we will definitely not be watching it on TVs in 2034.
Yeah, it just seems risky to me to make a contract until the year 2034.
I think they just want to lock them in. You know how contracts are these days. You can back out of a contract whenever you want.
You're right. Yeah, you probably could.
Contracts to me don't mean anything.
So that's sort of the specifics of the deal. Let me lay out my concerns here. Like I said, I think it'll be great for exposure, and certainly the more SEC content on TV, the better. I like that. But when you take ESPN, who on the one hand is trying to be a news reporting journalistic agency, and then on the other hand is trying to broadcast football games, and then on the other hand is directly tied in with the SEC, and whose money is now directly tied in with the SEC, it just... I don't know. There's something a little weird there.
I don't know. You can make the argument that they were already talking about the SEC all the time anyway because they've been the best conference for the last 10 years. Now, if the SEC begins to tail off, then it could become a problem. But I would see more of a problem with it if the ESPN had anything to do with the voting at the end of the year for the playoffs.
That is true.
But considering that they don't have anything to do with the bowls, I don't really see too much of a conflict.
Yeah, I can see that. The thing I worry about is that, the SEC or the ESPN even more so than usual, tries to trumpet the teams that are just going to get the biggest ratings rather than reporting fairly. But regardless of this deal, that was probably going to happen anyway.
I think so. Now that I brought it up, and I really didn't mean to bring it up, but this committee that's going to decide the playoff teams, I am scared to death of who's going to be on that
They still
committee.
have not figured that out yet.
They have not figured it out. They still have another year.
Getting closer, guys. You got to get on that.
I think it's a terrible idea. You should not have... Just let the BCS and the standings and maybe add another couple polls, but do not introduce the human element to this, because
I agree.
They just basically opened up another hole for them to be ridiculed.
I think it's going to be a disaster for just the same reason I just mentioned. I think the big name marquee teams are really going to benefit from the committee because of the human element, and teams that are just kind of squeaking in there, and probably the SEC is going to come out better with this committee because the perception is there right now that the SEC is the best teams.
But it really depends on who's on that committee, because you could have a group who is tired of seeing the SEC.
And how are you going to find people without bias? That's the big problem.
Right.
We talked about this before. Everyone who has enough knowledge to do this is biased.
Well, let's just make it, everybody breathing right now has a bias about
Right.
something. You are
Right.
biased to just be the way you're brought up.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see how it works. I don't think it's going to be very successful. Speaking of bias, Bob Stoops this week, head coach at Oklahoma, stating publicly that he thinks all of this talk about the SEC being the best conference is just a bunch of propaganda. Your thoughts?
Why can't his Sooners beat the SEC, if that's the case? And I just refer Bob to his brother, Mark, in Kentucky, and just ask him to I would just ask Bob, talk to your brother at the end of this next year and ask him how hard the SEC is.
Well, I think his argument was that the worst teams in the Big 12 were better this past year than the worst teams in the SEC.
Well, and I think that just shows the difference in mentality when the Big 12 measures by their worst teams, as
Right.
the SEC measures by their best team. I mean, when you don't win the national championship, you can't measure by your best team.
I think that's fair. And also, maybe he doesn't understand how math works, but if you have a lot of really good teams in one conference, it means there's got to be some really bad teams too, because there's only so many wins and losses to go around.
And but think about that. Let's think about that. How many bad teams were in the SEC? You had Arkansas, which at times could play pretty well, but had a terrible record, couldn't put it together.
Right. At Auburn.
Kentucky. You had Auburn.
They're a bad team.
They were a bad team. You had Kentucky.
They're a bad team.
Who else?
Other than that,
Ole Miss was surprisingly good.
Yeah.
Mississippi State was good for most of the year and then slid.
Vandy,
Vandy was excellent. South Carolina was good.
Yeah.
You had teams who are traditionally lower. You had three bad teams in the SEC.
And to be fair, the three teams that were bad were really bad by SEC standards. But at the same time, those teams got beat up by the SEC teams that were really good.
I would take last year's Auburn team to beat Kansas, and you can give Kansas 21 points. And I would take that bet every day.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Typical jealousy that occurs when, one conference has been so successful for so long. I think a lot of that is for recruiting purposes. That's why he's saying those things.
Already starting on next year.
Trying to get recruits to come. So, speaking of recruiting, big news to me, maybe not big news to anyone else. Auburn getting a couple of key recruits so far out of Mobile this year, an area that for the past couple of years has pretty much been exclusively
Crimson
Alabama
and white
territory. Auburn getting a commitment from Trey Williams, the linebacker, and granted, following my own personal rules, I'm no longer treating any commitment as a commitment until
even if they get the tattoo.
There's actually a signature on a page, but Trey Williams coming from the same school as Mark Barron and A.J. McCarron out of Mobile. So a very traditionally crimson and white school, like you said. I'll be interested to see how this one plays out. I think Damian Craig coming back, being from Mobile, he had a lot of success recruiting Mobile when he was at Florida State. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out against Alabama's recruiting efforts down there.
Yeah. I don't want to be negative about this story, but do you know why this is happening? Why they're getting more recruits in Mobile? It's because about 2 years ago when Julio came out, and there were a couple big names from down south. A year after they came to Alabama, there were big allegations as to players moving to Mobile and being fostered there.
Yeah.
And there was a mass exodus of coaches who were caught up in this scandal, and they all left. So, I mean, I think Alabama had a farm system in South Alabama.
Yeah,
and nobody talks about it.
And traditionally, the team that has been more successful, whether it be Alabama or Auburn, has had the better recruiting success in Mobile.
Right.
With Tommy Tuberville's good years, he got some great players out of Mobile. Nick Saban kind of came in, took over that region, has had a lot of success with a lot of good players there. So certainly a fertile region to pay attention to. And like we said, it's very, very early in recruiting season. Just thought it was interesting. Thought it was worth mentioning. So
All right.
All right, let's take another quick break. On the other side, plenty of other things going on in the sports world. Baseball, hockey, basketball. We're going to talk about all of them on the other side. It's just going to be action-packed, lots of words about sports that are not college football. We're going to do that.
It's going to be exciting.
Here on the other side of Outputting Our Coverage. Stick around.
I hopped off the plane at LAX with a dream, my cardigan. Welcome to the land of fame XX. Am I gonna fit in? Jumped in the cab, here I am for the first time. Look to my right and I see the Hollywood sign. This is all so crazy. Everybody seems so famous. My tummy's turning and I'm feeling kinda homesick. Too much pressure and I'm nervous. That's when the taxi man turned on the radio and a Jay-Z song was on. And the Jay-Z song was on. And the Jay-Z song was on. So I put my hands up to play my song. The butterflies fly away. Now do you know
All right.
Your favorite anthem.
My favorite anthem every day of my life, my theme song. We're back here on Outputting Our Coverage. David, NHL, go.
NHL has been so exciting. And just a quick side note, I was actually on a conference call yesterday with a company, and I noticed on the caller ID that the guy calling me was from Canada. And I asked him where he was from, and he said Vancouver. And being the new hockey fan that I am, I said, oh, okay, you got your Canucks going in the playoffs.
Oh, man, I
And
was
he-
impressed by that, wasn't
He
he?
quickly informed me that, no, we don't, because yesterday they just lost their series 4-0 to the San Jose Sharks.
Ouch
So
town.
there was a period of awkward silence, and then we just went right on in the
See,
presentation.
that's why you should never, ever talk about hockey, because it's just bad things.
It is, and I
Bad
could feel that it
things.
just killed him inside to tell me that. But the San Jose Sharks are moving on. They look pretty strong this year. A lot of neat storylines going on. The Blackhawks are taking care of the Wild like everybody thought they would. The Anaheim Ducks and the Detroit Red Wings has become a really interesting series. Detroit Red Wings historically been really good, at least in the past 25 years. They barely got into the playoffs. I mean, they just scraped in. They barely got through their last round. We're not really supposed to win that game. And now Anaheim has a 3-2 series lead. They still have every right to come back and win this series. Most of the games in this series have gone into overtime, so really exciting hockey if you want to watch that. LA Kings have a 3-2 lead on the St. Louis Blues. That's been a really physical, low-scoring matchup. Also gone into a lot of overtime games. LA, the Cinderella story from last year, who was an 8 seed, who made it all the way and won the NHL Stanley Cup. The really interesting series, I think, that maybe stands out ahead above all of them. The Pittsburgh Penguins were just supposed to roll through these playoffs. Sidney Crosby went out, and they still looked good, so they assumed when he came back in Game 2, they'd have no problem, but they lost by a goal. They're playing the New York Islanders, who are just absolutely a gritty team. They are just hanging in there with the Penguins. Penguins come back, win the next one, no problem. Then the next game, Islanders sneak in and win another one. So the series is tied at 2. Not really sure what Pittsburgh's doing. They're replacing their star goalie, Marc-Andre Fleury, with another goalie tonight because he's been terrible.
Wait, so you're telling me that guy's name is almost McFlurry?
It's almost McFlurry. If I was his teammate, I would definitely call him McFlurry.
Well, McFlurry sucks. So he
how about
suck too?
How about How about this?
From
From
my
now
expert
on,
NHL analysis there.
we're talking about NHL every week until the playoffs, just to talk about McFlurry, and
That
it's going to
sounds
be
good.
an inside show thing. So remember that. Put it down in your notebook.
All right, so layman's terms to me right now, it seems like a lot of teams get into the NHL playoffs.
There's a lot. There's 8 on each side, the Eastern and Western Conference. It's almost like it's actually exactly like the NBA playoffs. 7-game series all the way throughout.
Yeah.
1 through 8 seeds on each side. Best from the East meets the best from the West.
It just seems like that would take a long time with so many teams.
It takes a little bit, but I've got to say, if you sat me down in front of a TV and made me watch something, I will watch any NHL playoff game before I'll watch an NBA playoff game.
Okay.
The
interesting
one exception
statement.
maybe being if LeBron's playing. I love watching him.
How would one go about watching an NHL playoff game? What channel is that on?
I think they play them on CBS. Some of them play on ESPN. Not a lot. TNT, I think, carries a couple of them. So just search your local listing. And especially if you got DirecTV, they've got some really clear... I've said it before on the show. I think it bears repeating. No sport was helped more by the invention of HD TV than hockey.
Yeah.
You can watch the puck. You can actually see what's
You can
going
see
on.
where it is, yep.
So just one other series of note, the Capitals and the Rangers, another gritty one where they keep going back and forth. It seems like every single game in that series is won by a goal. And then the Toronto Maple Leafs haven't played a home playoff game since I think like 96. They finally got a home playoff game. The place went nuts, and they lost 5-2.
Ooh,
So
it happens.
They're down 3-1 to the Bruins. I don't think that'd be a great story for Boston to come up and win that series after everything that's happened there.
Absolutely. All right.
That's pretty much the NHL playoffs.
NBA, the National Basketballers Association.
I think they have some really interesting stories in the NBA. I want to hate the NBA Finals so much. I hate everything that it stands for. It does take too long to me. I don't think a lot of the basketball is interesting
I can help
most
you
of
with
the
this,
time.
David. I'm there. I can help you with your hate.
Can you? Well, but at the same time, it's been so good this year. There's been close games, blowouts. There's been surprise teams. Right now, the biggest surprise team is the Golden State Warriors. Came in as a 6th seed, but they finally got healthy. And they have a couple guys who can shoot from anywhere on the court. Steph
Curry. I
Steph
know that
Curry.
name.
Kurt Thompson.
I do not know that name.
He went off last night. He scored 27 points. Just an awesome shooting night. Golden State should have beaten San Antonio in Game 1. They had a 16-point lead with 4 minutes to go. San Antonio comes back, finds a way to tie it. They go into a single overtime, which isn't enough, so they go to double overtime. Golden State hits a late shot to go up by 2 with only 6 seconds to go. San Antonio calls a timeout, and on the inbounds play, Manu Ginobili, a shooting guard, sets a screen, and everybody for the Warriors fought through the screen and got to the guy coming across the screen. Left Manu Ginobili wide open for 3. One of the defenders was aware, got out close to him and put an arm up, but Manu rainbowed it over his hand. And with 1.6 seconds, hit the 3, went up by 1. A miraculous game. It was a really good game to watch, but they won the first one in overtime. But Golden State, they're resilient. They came back and won the next one. The series that a lot of people are talking about that I find boring is the Heat Bulls series. Nobody gave Chicago a chance.
Rightly so. I mean, they won the first game, but
Right.
they're gonna get blown out.
It's been an extremely physical game. Miami has not looked comfortable playing it, but last night they could have won that game by 40. It was terrible. Nate Robinson been the big star with them now, but I just think they're already playing their bench players. They have so many people that are hurt. They're playing their bench and their starting rotation. So when they have to rotate them out, they're playing guys who don't play in the NBA.
Right.
I mean, they're playing D-leaguers.
So any chance that Miami does not win the NBA championship?
Yes. I think there is a chance. It's not a big one.
All right, so if you're going to take Miami or the field right now, you're taking Miami, right?
I'm taking Miami. I'm not going away from that. They showed how dominant they could be.
Your top choice other than Miami at this point, who would it be?
Okay, if you had asked me before, I would have easily said the Thunder. However, Russell Westbrook going down completely changes their dynamic. I don't think they have a chance to lose to the Grizzlies, to be honest with you. They might not get past that series. If I had to pick right now, I would to win the whole thing or just to beat Miami.
Well, I'm saying if you're beating Miami, you're probably going to win the whole thing.
Well,
but
let's put it this way. If it's to win the whole thing, I think it's Golden State. I think they're a young team who doesn't really realize the pressure they're under, and they're just going to shoot it up. They're going to be a problem defensively for a lot of teams.
have they ever won an NBA championship?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that would be something.
Golden State's never won it. I think that would be interesting. But I think if you look at a team that has a best chance in a 7-game series, it would be the Indiana Pacers. They're big in the middle. They really close in when you come into the lane. They're physical. They guard the 3-point line really well. They make you shoot those long 2-pointers, which is the lowest percentage shot in the NBA. I think the Pacers probably would have the best chance of beating the Heat.
Okay.
In a 7-game series. But I think the Heat win. So
I do too.
Right now, every series is tied at 1 game apiece. You got Miami and Chicago, the Knicks and the Pacers. You've got the Thunder and the Grizzlies, and the Spurs and the Warriors. So really interesting. We'll know more by next week what the NBA is going to look like.
Major League Baseball.
Major League Baseball. 2 big storylines. One of them came out last night. The umpires just absolutely blew a call. It was late in the game, playing at Cleveland with the Indians. The A's are down 5-4 with 2 outs. They get a batter to come up, and he just rips one left center field deep. The ball caroms back into the play, and the outfielders get it in real quick. So the runner stops at second base, but the A's coach comes out, wants him to look at the instant replay. Something new with baseball, they've added the instant replay, so the umpires go underneath, and then they point to the runner to stay on second base. They declare it a double. When you go back and look at the broadcast, and the broadcast feed is exactly what the umpires were looking at, it is clearly a home run. It caroms off of one of the guardrails up on the deck.
Above the fence.
Above the fence.
Yeah.
Well above the fence. An obvious call that we're not really sure how they missed. And, of course, the A's end up losing the game by the 1 run in the 9th inning. They immediately throw out the coach. MLB has come out and said, yeah, they got it wrong, but it's a judgment call, so they're not overturning the result or making them play it.
How is it not a judgment call?
I don't understand their reasoning there.
Doesn't make sense to me. So, David, where do you stand on the instant replay debate?
I think they should have more of it, and I think they could make it pretty easy. They've already made it really easy. They just open the back fence up right behind the home plate, let the umpires go in for a second, look at some feeds, and then come back. I think that's perfect, and I think they should do it more. Important fair foul calls, really close plays at the plate. Especially, I could go without it because they have so many regular season games.
Right.
But in the postseason, they need it.
Yeah.
In the playoffs, I think they need it.
But, I mean, what happens if the A's miss the playoffs by 1 game?
That's true.
You know, you never know with baseball.
Yeah.
It can matter. And I think, like you said, the key is to make it quick so it doesn't make...
Because baseball's already a long game.
It's already too long, yeah.
Although, if you go back and go into the archives of our blogs, I think I did do a study where the Major League Baseball games are actually shorter than some of the college football games.
Really?
On average.
That's because CBS has so many commercials.
That's what it is.
That's how that one typically works. So.
The only other big Major League Baseball story that's come out is the Red Sox are having a lot of trouble with one of their pitchers. Now, he came out and was throwing one day, and everybody kind of saw something weird going on, couldn't figure out what it was, and then a pretty prominent ex-baseball player came out and said he's throwing spitballs. Now, he's not licking his hand and then grabbing the ball, but a couple of ex-baseball players actually explained it today, and I did not know this was happening. The pitchers are spraying on Athletic sunscreen, Bullfrog, and then they're getting sweaty and they're wiping their arm and getting some of the sunscreen, and one of the ex-pitchers said engineers would be proud of the paste that comes from doing that. They say you could build a foundation of a house with that paste. It just gives you so much extra grip on the ball. The interesting part of this is that before that game, the pitcher's 5-0. He's got a 1.06 ERA. The next game after the controversy, in four innings, he gives up 6 runs. So
coincidence, maybe. I mean, you never know with baseball.
You never know, but from reports, they say 90% of the pitchers are using this stuff. And how do you outlaw sunscreen?
I mean, that's really part of the game.
I
Stuff
think
like
so.
that. It's been going on for ages. I mean, Gaylord Perry He put Vaseline under his cap, and he would rub it and put it on the ball. I mean, I don't know.
I think it's just part of it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been so desensitized to cheating in baseball with steroids that now we're kind of like, somebody rubbing something on a ball before they pitch it.
Whatever.
How quaint.
Right.
You know? It's kind of like corking your bat. I'm pretty sure, I remember the reaction to Sammy Sosa corking his bat, but it turns out he was corking his body too.
Oh,
so
right, yeah.
I think we've been a little bit desensitized to this. David, tell me about this pitcher for the Mets, Harvey.
Oh, man, he is
I've been hearing, at first I thought they meant Harvey Updike, and I was like, he doesn't seem like he'd be much of a pitcher.
No, he's not. Harvey is a big right-handed pitcher, throws a lot of heat, but he is untouchable right now. His location is on point. Not a lot of people were talking about him preseason, but now a lot of people, after watching him, his mechanics, a lot of his mechanics are right there. He's not going to get injured. They're saying that he could be in the top 5 pitchers in the next 3 years. Yeah. Coming up, Strasburg, everybody saw the talent. He's a freak, but his mechanics were terrible, and you're now starting to see that
he's breaking down.
He's breaking down.
Yeah. Now, I've even seen some people say that this new guy, Harvey, is possibly the best pitcher in Mets history.
That's too early.
Doesn't that seem a little bit crazy to you? I mean,
it
guys like Tom Seaver, Dwight Gooden.
Right. That's too early. You can't say that.
Maybe the best. Could you make an argument for the best first season or so in Mets history? Or,
I mean, I guess, but he's only pitched 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, that's not a very big sample size.
No, I think that's just ridiculous that you're saying that.
Who are some other rookies we should be looking out for right now? Even guys that are in AAA right now that may be coming up later.
I don't know. I don't follow baseball that closely.
Okay.
So
you gave me a good tip on Mike Trout last year.
I did give you...
For all of our fantasy baseball aficionados, I don't know if you had any advice for them.
Next week I will bring you a rookie that you should be looking out for.
Okay.
I think if we're doing fantasy baseball advice, I would say go get you some leadoff hitters. This is the year... Leadoff hitters are having the best year since 1974. With on-base percentage, batting average, and steals so far in a year. So go out.
Small ball is back.
Small ball is back. The steroids seem to be lessening in the game. A lot of teams are trying to play for the 1 or 2 runs. Although you do have some leadoff guys showing some pop. They're hitting some home runs. So I would say go find you a good leadoff guy.
All right. Great advice there from David. Any other final words of wisdom before we part this week, David?
2 weeks from this show, we will do our first preview for SEC football.
Yeah, it's starting. So you need to mark that on your calendars right now. You're not going to want to miss these SEC previews. We're going to devote an entire week to each team this year. We kind of got suckered in last year, had to cram some teams in at the last minute.
We didn't start the show until late last year.
We're not going to do that this year. We're going to take care of you. Make sure you know everything you need to know.
Our show anniversary is coming up.
It is. It's coming. It's a very important occasion. And to celebrate, we'll probably have to talk about the NHL again. It's going to suck.
And McFlurry.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of McFlurry, we expect cake at our anniversary.
Absolutely. You guys better send us something or we'll stop doing the show. And we know how disappointed you would be about that. So
I agree.
Very, very disappointed. Anyway, we'll be back regardless next week. Stick around for an entire week. Make sure you're minding your P's and Q's and listen in next week for outputting our coverage. We'll see you then.